Something just changed the tone of the entire crisis with Iran, and it happened in just a few sentences. In a new statement about the Strait of Hormuz, Donald Trump drew a line that many analysts say the world has never seen so clearly before. He warned that if American forces find sea mines in the shipping lanes, the response from the United States will bring, in his words, military consequences without precedent. He did not say strong sanctions. He did not say limited strikes. He said something that sounds a lot more like a declaration of war waiting for a trigger. And that trigger could be hidden, silent, underwater, in one of the most sensitive points on the world map. To understand why this ultimatum is making so many people nervous, you need to know what is at stake in the Strait of Hormuz. Imagine the global oil market as a giant funnel. On the wide side are the oil fields of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the Emirates. On the narrow side, there is a stretch of water only a few dozen kilometers wide between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula. Almost all the oil that leaves there for the rest of the world has to pass exactly through this funnel. Every day, tankers loaded with crude oil and liquefied natural gas cross that narrow corridor. Insurance companies, trading houses, and governments are watching it almost in real time. Because if something happens there, if ships stop, if they are attacked, if captains are too afraid to enter, the price of oil does not just rise slowly, it jumps. And that jump shows up at the gas pump, on your electricity bill, and shipping costs, in everything. That is why the word mines instantly froze the room when Trump mentioned it. In his new ultimatum, Trump made it clear that any mine found in the Strait will be treated as an act of war against the United States and its allies. According to the message, U.S. forces will not only neutralize any minefield, they will also strike, with overwhelming force, the sources of these attacks. He did not explain in detail what that means: bases, ships, coastal installations. And that ambiguity is exactly what keeps military analysts awake at night. Behind the scenes, the Pentagon has already moved more mine-hunting ships toward the region. These are not glamorous aircraft carriers or stealth fighters that appear in the photos. They are slower, more vulnerable vessels, specialized in detecting and neutralizing underwater mines. Operating them in a narrow, contested stretch of water, under the eyes, and possibly the missiles, of Iran, is one of the riskiest jobs in modern naval warfare. Iran, for its part, officially denies having laid any mines in the Strait. Authorities in Tehran call the accusations fabricated and say the real threat comes from American warships. At the same time, leaders of the Revolutionary Guard use a defiant tone, claim they completely control the area, and say that any attempt to escort oil tankers will be a dangerous adventure for the United States. It is a pattern we have seen before, the formal denial on one side and the aggressive rhetoric on the other. While this public back and forth plays out on television, something else is happening behind closed doors. Oil traders have already started to price in the possibility that even a small incident, a damaged hull, a ship forced to stop, a rumor about an activated mine, might trigger exactly the unprecedented consequences that Trump promised. Insurance for ships crossing the region gets more expensive. Some captains start to consider much longer alternative routes. And markets, which hate uncertainty, respond with volatility. In Washington, the reactions are sharply divided. Many Republicans praise Trump's ultimatum as a necessary show of strength. They argue that Iran only backs down when it faces a clear, tough, and unpredictable response. In their view, saying unprecedented consequences is a way of telling Tehran and anyone else watching that the U.S. will not allow the world's energy lifeline to be held hostage. Democrats, however, see something very different. They warn that language like this can trap the United States in an escalation that is hard to escape. If mines are indeed discovered by American ships or even by an ally, the pressure on Trump to act according to his own words will be enormous. Backing down would look like weakness. Pushing ahead could mean war. And that is exactly the kind of trap many critics say should be avoided. Outside the U.S., the reactions are even more complex. European leaders publicly defend freedom of navigation and condemn any attempt to close the strait. But in private, many fear that an open conflict would make oil prices explode and push their economies into a new crisis. Countries in the Gulf, like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, depend on the U.S. to protect their export routes, yet they know that in case of war, they become direct targets for Iranian missiles and drones. Some analysts suggest that this ultimatum is not just about Iran. They point out that the biggest buyer of the oil that passes through the Strait of Hormuz is not Europe, and not even the United States. It is China. By turning the strait into a stage for American power and drawing such hard red lines around any threat there, Trump is also sending an indirect message to Beijing. The message would be simple. If the U.S. controls the safety of this corridor, it gains leverage over the flow of energy that feeds the Chinese economy. Officially, the White House doesn't say that out loud. Public statements talk about security, about protecting allies, about guaranteeing free trade. But background reports and off-the-record comments raise the possibility that there is a much longer geopolitical game going on. A game in which oil, the Strait, and the ultimatum are pieces on the board of great power competition. Critics argue that this is where the real danger lies. Because the more strategic layers you add to a conflict, the harder it becomes to control. You are no longer just responding to one provocation or another. You are trying to send messages to multiple audiences at the same time, to Iran, to allies, to markets, to global rivals. And in that noise, the risk of miscalculation grows. Imagine a simple scenario. A coalition ship detects something underwater. Sensors suggest that it might be a mine. The information climbs the chain of command. Television pundits are already talking about it. Social media fills with images, real or fake. Trump, who promised unprecedented consequences, is pressured by allies, by critics, and by his own base. Launching a strike would fulfill the promise. Waiting for more confirmation might look like hesitation. It is exactly under this kind of tension that historic and sometimes irreversible decisions are made. Meanwhile, everyday life seems to go on as normal far away from the Strait. People drive to work, fill up their cars, pay bills, scroll the news on their phones. But behind every price at the pump, every airline ticket, every product on a truck, there is an invisible factor: risk. The risk that a few hidden devices under the water could ignite something far bigger than anyone planned. And that is where Trump's ultimatum to Iran stops being just another strong phrase and turns into a question hanging over the entire world. Is this a strategy of deterrence, a way to stop Iran from ever considering the use of mines, or is it a ladder toward a confrontation that no one really knows how to end? Trump's supporters say that strength prevents war, that drawing clear red lines stops hostile regimes from constantly testing the limits. His critics answer that red lines, when drawn with language this broad, create dangerous obligations, especially in a region where incidents and misunderstandings are almost routine. What we know for now is simple and at the same time unsettling. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most critical choke points on Earth. Ships keep crossing it. Navies keep watching every move. Intelligence services monitor any sign of mines, sabotage, or attack. And all of this is happening under the shadow of one phrase: consequences without precedent. Whether this will reinforce Trump's image as a strong leader in the middle of a campaign, or trigger a crisis that spins out of control and hits the global economy, we are going to find out very soon, probably before the next tanker reaches the other side of the strait.